Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. A few days later, the work on the sect headquarters continued. No more incidents occurred, and everyone would have quickly forgotten about it were it not for the fact that Bai Xiaochun only appeared in the open blanketed with paper talismans. Xu Baosai and some of his other friends were very curious about the situation, and Bai Xiaochun couldn't simply refuse to tell them the truth of the matter. Therefore, he used a variety of vague wording to explain that the river-defying sect was being haunted by a ghost. Xu Baosai and the others were quite frightened, and soon started imitating Bai Xiaochun, plastering all sorts of paper talismans on themselves to ward off evil spirits. Of course, they didn't quite use as many as Bai Xiaochun did. Bai Xiaochun's talismans covered virtually every inch of his body other than his face. When he went out and about, jaws would drop, and eyes would go wide. Whether it was Zhou Xinqi or Ghost Fong, Song Ke or Nine Isles, all of them were completely taken aback. One evening when Bai Xiaochun was strutting about festooned with talismans, he happened to run into Gongsun Wan'er. Even she was shocked by Bai Xiaochun's appearance. Jaw-dropping, she blurted, "Elder brother Xiaochun, what are you?" "Well, if it isn't junior sister Gongsun." Bai Xiaochun looked her up and down, then glanced around furtively, stepped closer, and whispered, "Look, I'm gonna tell you something that you have to keep secret. The river-defying sect is haunted by a ghost. That's why I have all these paper talismans on, to ward off evil spirits." Gongsun Wan'er's eyes went even wider. A moment passed, and she jokingly looked him up and down, then reached out and rubbed some of the talismans. Finally, she forced a smile onto her face, promised that she wouldn't tell anyone else, and left. Feeling very pleased with himself, Bai Xiaochun continued on his way. Eventually, everyone was talking about the matter of the sect being haunted. By the time the patriarchs of the 4 divisions realized what was happening, it was too late to quell the rumors. Bai Xiaochun's eye-catching appearance left them frustrated and shaking their heads wryly. He's at Gold Core, and he's still scared of ghosts. Besides, that ghost is so terrifyingly powerful that those paper talismans he's wearing would be completely useless against it. Chuckling dryly, the patriarchs decided to just ignore the matter. A few more days passed, and when Bai Xiaochun realized that no further incidents were forthcoming, he finally started to feel more at ease. Sighing emotionally, he said, "It doesn't matter what demons or devils or ghosts come around, with my special anti-evil clothing, they'll all be turned into nothing but ash. Yet again, I've saved the sect. Nobody even knows the true extent of what I, the junior patriarch of the river-defying sect, have done to help out all my other fellow disciples." It was currently late at the night, and he was sitting cross-legged in his immortals cave, meditating. However, even as the words left his mouth, ripples spread out across the floor. They were strange ripples that seemed to be separating the area from the world outside, and they were accompanied by a frigid coldness. The sudden development caused Bai Xiaochun's eyes to widen, and a shrill shriek to escape his lips. He leapt to his feet, slapping his bag of holding and producing a huge stack of evil-warding paper talismans. "Get out of here. Stay away. I'm dangerous. I'm wearing hundreds of evil-warding talismans." However, even as he backed up, trembling, a red beam of light shot out of his bag of holding, which was none other than the mask he had worn during his time as Night Crypt. The mask was vibrating and emanating ripples, and soon, the voice of an old man began to speak from within the mask. You, who?" Bai Xiaochun shrieked. Without any hesitation, he threw the entire stack of paper talismans at the mask, and then poured all of the Heaven Dao Gold Core power he could into it. Within that stack were talismans of sealing, crushing, and warding, and once the power hit them, they virtually exploded. Rumbling filled the air, and the mask trembled as countless paper talismans slapped down onto it. Whatever connection it had with the ground was severed, and the mask fell down. In that same moment, the fluctuations vanished, and everything went back to normal. Beads of sweat covered Bai Xiaochun's forehead. Even in the heat of the moment, he knew that the voice which had spoken was not the ghost he feared, but rather, the mysterious group that was behind the mask. A moment later, the soul of imposter Night Crypt flew out of the mask, trembling with fear. Looking at Bai Xiaochun, he cried, "They came. They really came. We're finished, Bai Xiaochun, finished. You took the relic of eternal indestructibility, and now the mysterious power is after us. We're dead for sure. There's no way they'll show leniency to betrayers. They'll probably skin us alive and turn us into fertilizer." "Shut up," Bai Xiaochun barked, annoyed and surprised at the same time. However, he also felt somewhat guilty. After all, he really had taken away the little turtle. Damn it, I'm not even wearing the mask. How could they have tracked me down anyway? He thought about simply throwing the mask away, but couldn't quite bring himself to get rid of something so precious. Besides, the soul of imposter Nightcrypt was still stuck inside, so if he threw it away, he would be screwing him over too. What do we do, Bai Xiaochun? If imposter Nightcrypt weren't a soul body, he would definitely have been leaking tears. Bai Xiaochun looked anxiously at imposter Nightcrypt, then took a moment to think about the situation. Despite some consideration, he couldn't come up with any solution other than to hand the mask over to the patriarchs. What a pity to get rid of a treasure like this that can change your appearance. Bai Xiaochun wasn't sure about what to do. Another half a month went by, and when nothing else happened with the mask, he finally started to calm down. The work on the sect headquarters was approaching its conclusion. The patriarchs were also reaching the end of their discussions about how to handle the situation in the lower reaches, as well as the territory currently under the control of the river-defying sect. Most importantly, they were finalizing all the official sect rules. According to the new arrangement, one of the 4 divisions would be formally in charge of the sect for a 200-year period. After those 200 years, the sect affairs would pass to the next division. The same arrangement would determine who the sect leader was. The first division to wield leadership power in the sect was the Spirit Stream Division. No longer was Zheng Yuandong to be the leader of the Spirit Stream Division, he was to be the sect leader of the entire river-defying sect. Although his cultivation base was a bit lacking, he was more than qualified to handle the responsibilities. In fact, with the agreement and help of the patriarchs, Zheng Yuandong decided to sacrifice his potential for future growth to make an immediate breakthrough into core formation. Furthermore, he made arrangements for Li Qinghao to succeed him as the second sect leader, 100 years later. At the end of the Spirit Stream Division's 200 years of leadership, the Blood Stream Division would take over. After that would come the Profound Stream Division, and then finally the Pill Stream Division. None of the patriarchs were opposed to the arrangement. Soon, the sect headquarters was completed. The Blood Ancestor and the Dire Sky Banyan stood tall, and the 4 mountain ranges spread out in all directions. The last step was to activate the grand spell formation, and then everything would be finished. The cheering was deafening. A month before, the 3 Heavenspan battleships had been sent downriver to the lower reaches, and had returned with the disciples who had been unable to fight in the war for various reasons. With all the disciples present, the river-defying sect now had well over 1 million members. It was quite a bustling place. A grand ceremony was held to commemorate the occasion, and numerous invitations were sent out into the middle reaches to the other 3 great sects, as well as certain ancient cultivator clans. The formalities lasted for 7 days. The Starry River Court, Dao River Court and Polarity River Court all sent people to offer formal congratulations. Not a single one of the cultivator clans failed to send representatives. As for the 4 major sects who had risen up in the lower reaches, they also sent representatives with congratulations and gifts. During that 7-day period, the river-defying sect was the talk of the entire middle reaches. As the junior patriarch of the sect, Bai Xiaochun obviously had a very high standing, and was the subject of much attention. He made public appearances every day, wearing ceremonial clothing and showing off his veins of steel. He could not have glittered with any greater glory than he did. Bai Xiaochun quickly fell in love with his role. However, the patriarchs, as well as Li Qinghao, only got more nervous, fearing that he would reveal his true nature in front of all the crowds. However, no one noticed any such clues. He chatted with people wittily, and was definitely the center of attention. Whenever he intentionally unleashed his murderous aura, everyone in the area was shocked. The patriarchs were very pleased with his performance, and Bai Xiaochun was quite proud of himself. To him, it was actually a very simple matter to put on such an act. 7 days later, the ceremonies ended, the visitors left, and the sect quieted down. At the moment, the biggest problem facing the river-defying sect was they had no Diva Realm cultivator. The other 3 great sects in the middle reaches all had a Diva Realm patriarch to oversee the sect. That was the only way to truly be a great sect, and it was a fatal weakness for the river-defying sect. It was only now that Bai Xiaochun was learning about how the higher levels of the cultivation system in the Heavenspan realm worked. After Qi condensation, foundation establishment, core formation, and nascent soul came the Diva realm. The Diva realm was completely terrifying. It was like a complete fusion with heaven and earth, in which the cultivator didn't unleash his own power, but rather, the power of all creation around him. He drew upon the energy of heaven and earth to emit crushing pressure and utilize divine abilities that went beyond the imaginations of even nascent soul cultivators. For many years, there had only ever been 4 Diva realm cultivators in the eastern middle reaches of the Heavenspan River. However, one of them, the diva from the Sky River Court, had been killed, leaving only 3 behind. Diva realm experts were powerful enough to be able to destroy entire sects, which meant that if one of them attacked the river-defying sect, it would most certainly be destroyed. Even with Bai Xiaochun controlling the Blood Ancestor and the assistance of the dire Skybanyan, they would still be defeated. Only by calling upon the assistance of the true spirit would they be able to survive, and unfortunately, they had already used their one and only river-defying pill. Although the river-defying sect currently seemed very powerful, they were lacking the highest level of power they needed. One of the driving forces in the Patriarch's ability to reach a decision regarding the sect rules, and in fact, one of the reasons they had all agreed to fight together into the Middle Reaches to begin with, was that the spiritual energy and resources there were such that reaching the Diva realm was a distinct possibility. At the moment, the 3 people most likely of being able to reach the Diva realm were Master Godwind, Frigid Sect, and Crimson Soul. After the ceremonies were over, Master Godwind and Crimson Soul chose to go into secluded meditation. The other patriarchs did the same. Each and every nascent soul cultivator hoped to eventually reach the point of becoming a diva. In all of the eastern Heavenspan River, there were no more than 10 devas total, and that included the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect. From that, it was easy to see not only how powerful they were, but also how rare. In a grand hall on Mount River Defiance, the founding patriarch of the Spirit Stream Division, Frigid Sect, had called Bai Xiaochun to explain to him certain matters regarding the sect and devas. Although you can't quite say that in the diva realm it's possible to live as long as heaven and earth, with the energy at your disposal, you can remain unwithered for almost all eternity. Your battle prowess would be such that you could dominate the entire cultivation world. Therefore, I will be going into secluded meditation to strive for my chance to break through into the diva realm. This was actually Bai Xiaochun's first time hearing about the diva realm, and he already wished he could reach it. What's after the diva realm? He asked. Frigid Sect remained silent for a moment, but his eyes were already shining brightly. After that is the demigod realm. Unexpectedly, the moment he said the word demigod, a peal of thunder rang out in the sky above. The sudden crack of thunder startled Bai Xiaochun. Even saying the name can cause fluctuations to appear in heaven and earth. The demigod realm defies description. Perhaps people like that really are just as the name describes, part god. The truth was that not even Frigid Sect knew much about the demigod realm. In all of the Eastern cultivation world, there is only one demigod, and he is the living reserve power of the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect. That patriarch is the only reason why the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect became a river source sect. This was Bai Xiaochun's first time hearing such things, and his eyes were as wide as saucers. Without even thinking about it, he asked, "What's after demigod?" "I don't know," Frigid Sect replied, shaking his head. Having finished his explanation of cultivation, he extended his right hand, and 3 glowing motes of light appeared. Within those motes of light could be seen a scroll painting, a reptilian scale, and a dagger. The scroll painting possessed the air of something that had existed for many years, and pulsed with an ancient aura. As for the scale, Bai Xiaochun's first impression was that it was beginning to rot. He couldn't even tell what kind of creature it came from. And then there was the dagger, which actually looked less like a dagger and more like a black horn. The landscape of 9 provinces is an earth-tier precious treasure, capable of storing a vast quantity of items. Anything that gets sucked in can be refined, and then sealed with an enslaving branding mark. It can provide an incredible boost to speed, and is even capable of short-range teleportation. The ancient devil scale is also an earth-tier precious treasure. Not even a nascent soul expert could break through it. Unfortunately, I only have this one scale. With more, a full suit of armor could be forged, which would make it even more difficult for nascent soul cultivators to deal with you. Last is this dagger, which is also an earth-tier precious treasure. It can summon a rebel dragon of incredible power. You're giving all of these to me? Bai Xiaochun said, his heart starting to pound as he eyed the motes of light. Any one of the objects in front of him would be enough to arouse his excitement, let alone all of them. He swallowed hard. As the junior patriarch of the river-defying sect, you will represent the sect when you go out into the world. It's only natural that these 3 precious treasures should go to you. Take some time to get used to them. In the future, it will be up to you to make a name for the river-defying sect. Frigid Sect smiled. Bai Xiaochun was incredibly important to the river-defying sect, and the patriarchs had all agreed that since they were going into secluded meditation, Bai Xiaochun should be given 3 precious treasures to use for his own protection. Bai Xiaochun was visibly excited, and quickly offered profuse thanks. Then he took the 3 precious treasures and began to fondle them lovingly. Frigid Sect cleared his throat. I'm going to enter into secluded meditation now. In a moment, someone from the senior generation will come to pay you a visit, so please wait for him. Finally, take this jade slip. It's an arcane cultivation technique for you now that you've reached core formation, a secret magic of the former Frigid school. A strange expression could be seen on Frigid Sect's face, but before Bai Xiaochun could look up to notice, Frigid Sect tossed him a jade slip, turned, and vanished. Someone from the senior generation? Bai Xiaochun asked, catching the jade slip. But who? However, Frigid Sect was gone. As the moments ticked by, though, Bai Xiaochun's anticipation grew. Maybe they're going to give me some more rewards, he thought, getting more excited. As time went on, he was coming to find that, as the junior patriarch of the river-defying sect, he was treated very well. Someone from the senior generation was even coming to give him a gift. Taking a deep breath, he rose to his feet and stood there straight and tall, trying to look as somber as possible. Inside, he was already feeling pleased with himself. He knew that this pose was one that the older generation would definitely be pleased with. After waiting for a bit, Bai Xiaochun was starting to lose patience. But then, he suddenly got a very strange feeling, as if someone were watching him. Without even thinking about it, he turned around, and when he saw what was right there in front of him, his eyes went wide. At some indeterminable point, a rabbit had appeared right behind him. The rabbit didn't walk around on all fours like a normal rabbit. It stood on its hind legs. It had its hands clasped behind its back much like a person would do, and it was staring at Bai Xiaochun with its red eyes. Its ears stuck straight up above its head, and although it looked somewhat comical, there was something ancient in its eyes that made the rabbit seem completely beyond the ordinary. You, Bai Xiaochun said. Gasping, he backed up. Then he clasped his hands over his mouth. Perhaps other people might not recognize this rabbit, but Bai Xiaochun did. He would probably recognize it even if it were transformed into a pile of ash. This was none other than that damnable talking rabbit. The truth was that way back in the fight outside the profound Stream Sect city, when he saw the rabbit and the monkey together, he'd begun to suspect that something strange was going on. Now that the rabbit had appeared again, he began to pant. However, he quickly plastered a smile onto his face, and then cautiously clasped his hands in greeting. Disciple offers greetings, senior. The rabbit snorted coldly as it looked Bai Xiaochun up and down. For some reason, the rabbit wasn't repeating his words like it usually did, and although that should have made Bai Xiaochun happy, he was only left with a dark premonition. Getting more nervous, he backed up a few paces and said, Senior, you looked quite pleased with yourself when you tried to chase me down last time, the rabbit said, his voice cracking with ancientness. However, I won't lower myself to your level. Bai Xiaochun immediately started to get more nervous. I've come here today to perform a little test. Let's see if those precious treasures of yours will really work. As he glared at Bai Xiaochun, his mouth widened into a smile that filled Bai Xiaochun's heart with terror. Letting out a shriek, he didn't hesitate at all to turn and flee. However, in the moment he started to move, the rabbit blurred into motion, raising his right foot and kicking Bai Xiaochun hard on the back. A rumbling sound echoed out, mixing with Bai Xiaochun's scream as he flew through the air. However, even as he flew, he righted himself and then shot forward with greater speed. Help! He's trying to kill me. A killer rabbit. Patriarchs, save me, save me. Bai Xiaochun sped along frantically, his shrieks echoing out in all directions. Many disciples heard, and immediately looked up to see what was happening. What they saw was a rabbit flying through the air, slamming into Bai Xiaochun and sending him spinning. Then the rabbit began to cackle with laughter. Scream, the louder the better. Remember how you tried to blow me up during our last chase? Damn it, I went to hide in 10,000 Snakes Valley, and yet you suddenly showed up looking for me. I even went all the way to the Bloodstream sect to hide from you. Why you little bastard. I can't believe you tracked me down to the Bloodstream sect. The rabbit's eyes were bright red as it chased after Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun's screams echoed out into the sky. Soon, certain cultivators from the Blood and Spirit Stream divisions recognized the rabbit, and began to cry out in alarm. Heavens, that's the talking rabbit. What's that rabbit doing here? And why isn't it repeating things? Bai Xiaochun felt more than ever that he was being unjustly accused. He instantly drew upon the full power of his Heaven Dao Gold Core, and even his undying Heavenly King body. Although that pushed him forward with incredible speed, it didn't make him faster than the rabbit. Furthermore, the rabbit was a very crafty character, and knew just where to kick him for it to hurt the most. Scowling on the verge of tears, he considered calling upon the 3 precious treasures he had just been given. But before he could, the rabbit shot forward with blinding speed, causing a series of sonic booms to echo out as he kicked Bai Xiaochun over and over again. Most outrageous of all was that the rabbit actually chose to kick him in the face. Bai Xiaochun felt like he was going to go crazy. The rabbit was obviously refusing to give him a chance to use the precious treasures, all in its attempt to bully its way to revenge. You can't blame me for everything. You're the one who loves to repeat everything. Why you're a total bully. Behind him, the rabbit roared, you think I want to repeat what everybody says? Damn it, nobody asked you to bring up that topic. This is all your fault. The rabbit unleashed more kicks at Bai Xiaochun. All your fault, especially the last time. I can't believe you only said half a sentence. Do you know that you almost drove me literally insane? Listen to me, you little punk, the next time I'm repeating what people say, you had better finish your sentences. The angrier the rabbit got, the harder and more viciously it kicked Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun was sore all over, and was being driven to the point of rage. He's trying to kill me, he howled. He's trying to kill me. Somebody save me. I'm the junior patriarch of the river-defying sect. I've spilled my own blood for the river-defying sect. Save me, patriarchs. However, no matter how loudly he shouted, the nascent soul Taoist masters didn't respond at all. Bai Xiaochun felt completely maligned. You're pushing things too far, rabbit. So what if I only said half a sentence? If I had said any more, and you repeated it, I would have lost my poor little life. I said half a sentence back then, and I'll say half a sentence next time too. In fact, I'll do it now. What comes after I, Bai Xiaochun? Tell me. Hurry up, spit it out. What comes after I, Bai Xiaochun? As the words left his mouth, a tremor suddenly ran through the rabbit. A blank look appeared in his eyes, and he suddenly lurched to a halt in midair. Bai Xiaochun. In response, Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped, and it was the same with the other disciples who had come to see what was going on. Everyone was looking at the rabbit, which now looked completely different from before. Instead of keeping his hands clasped behind his back, he dropped down on all fours, like a normal rabbit. Ears sticking straight up, he began to repeat the same words over and over again. Bai Xiaochun's heart was already pounding, but instead of continuing to flee, he cried, come on, tell me. What words come after I, Bai Xiaochun? Equally nervous, the rabbit howled, I, Bai Xiaochun. Come on, tell me. Spit it out. Looking excited, Bai Xiaochun took a few steps forward toward the rabbit. Now that he had found what appeared to be the rabbit's weakness, he was eager to take advantage of it. I, Bai Xiaochun. The rabbit's eyes were so red that they looked like they might start bleeding. His fur was standing on end, and the pressure being put on him from Bai Xiaochun made him tremble on the verge of collapse. With that, he let out a bellow like a crack of thunder, then turned and began to flee for his life. At the same time, it began to cry out all sorts of gossip, a large amount of it having to do with Patriarch Crimson Soul. Incensed, Crimson Soul himself appeared and tried to chase down the rabbit, but it soon disappeared. At long last, Bai Xiaochun realized that the rabbit clearly wasn't stable mentally. Sometimes it was clear-headed, other times not. Only when it was clear-headed did it act like an old bastard. The most important thing was that their last encounter had left a deep impression on him. The matter of saying only half a sentence could drive the rabbit nearly to collapse. So that's how it is. Ha ha ha, trifling little rabbit, how dare you try to tangle with Bai Xiaochun? Let's see if you ever dare to mess with me again in the future. He breathed a sigh of relief, and was just about to continue to boast when suddenly he realized that Patriarch Crimson Soul had given up on chasing the rabbit, and was currently glaring at him. Then he thought back to some of the things the rabbit had said, and quickly ducked his head and hurried back to his immortal's cave. It wasn't my fault, he muttered. Nobody did anything to help me. Everyone just watched the poor junior patriarch getting beaten up by that rabbit. Rubbing his face discontentedly, he decided that it would be best not to go out very often. After all, if he ended up chasing the rabbit again, who knew what the thing might say? Hey, what about Bruiser? Where did he get off to? I haven't seen him for days now. I bet he's off messing around with some female beast. Because of the special connection between the two of them, he could tell that Bruiser was safe, though, so he didn't give it much more thought. Ah, whatever. I never took the time to rest and recover after reaching Heaven Dao Gold Core. I might as well take advantage of the time now to go into secluded meditation. With that, he made his decision. He immediately sealed his immortal's cave up tight and began to focus on cultivation. Time passed. A month later, he opened his eyes, and found that his cultivation base was much more stable than before, and had even made a bit of progress. With that, he slapped his bag of holding and produced a jade slip. It was pitch black, and didn't seem very impressive. However, as soon as he put his hand on it, a sensation of intense coldness filled him. This was none other than the technique that Frigid Sect had given him. After scanning the jade slip with divine sense, Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered with surprise. Frigid School will evolving incantation. The cultivation of this technique requires heavenspan river water. However, instead of consuming it, you alter its structure into two types, frigid and will. Use the technique to form the frigid, use the frigid to evolve the will. If one masters it, one's will can freeze everything in the area with frigid coldness. What's the will it talks about? As he continued to study the jade slip, his surprise grew. Eventually, he put the slip down. So, will is the ultimate level of control power, something completely and utterly bizarre. Essentially, it comes by fusing control power with one's own thoughts. The Violet Chi Cauldron control art develops control power, and the Violet Chi Heavenspan incantation uses that control power to create the Heavenspan Dharma Eye. That's only the initial step toward fusing control power with one's thoughts. The Frigid School will evolving incantation involves a complete fusion of one's thoughts with control power. Then, true willpower can be developed and grown. Bai Xiaochun took a long, deep breath, and slowly picked up the jade slip again. Finally, he understood the truth. The Spirit Stream Sect techniques were all steps in a ladder leading to the ultimate form of power. Will. In that case, I can definitely succeed with my human controlling grand magic. In fact, by using will, I can also complete my work with the powers of gravity and repulsion. Will, he murmured. Looking over at a rock in the corner of the Immortals' cave, he tried to use nothing but his own thoughts to get it to fly up into the air. Almost immediately, the little rock trembled in place. Although it didn't fly up, Bai Xiaochun was already delighted. He had just moved that rock without any magic, without any cultivation-based power, without any divine abilities. He had used only his own thoughts. After a bit of time passed, he suppressed his excitement and began to think about going to get a huge bucket of Heavenspan river water to start cultivating. All of a sudden, he thought about his Undying Live Forever technique. Closing his eyes, he began to review the information he had received from the Legacy of the Blood Ancestor, the third volume of Undying Tendons. Tendons were the source of speed, and the power of tendons could make a person strong and tough. When you combined such levels of speed and power into a fist strike, the shocking results would surpass anything that had come before it. Even more fantastic was that the ultimate combination of speed and power in the Undying Tendons technique led to an incredible divine ability, a hexing magic that could be unleashed with every punch or kick. It was a hexing magic that could seal anything and everything. The first two volumes of the Undying technique provided miraculous divine abilities in addition to the ultimately powerful fleshly body improvements, and this one was no different. The Undying Hex. Bai Xiaochun's eyes shone with bright light. That was the divine ability that came with the third volume, something similar to the throat-crushing grasp and the mountain-shaking bash. Unlike the other two volumes, the Undying Tendons were not divided into different levels. Instead, the goal was to apply the technique to every part of the body. It was divided up into the four limbs, the torso, and the head. The only way to master the technique was to apply it to each and every one of those body parts. After delving into the Frigid School will evolving incantation and the Undying Tendons, Bai Xiaochun was filled with anticipation regarding what was to come in the future. That was especially true after sensing his own flourishing life force. Although he wasn't completely sure of the limits of his longevity, he had the feeling that it was at least 1,000 years or so. Many people found cultivation to be dull and boring, but he didn't mind it at all, and quickly immersed himself in the Frigid School will evolving incantation and the Undying Tendons. After some consideration, he decided that he would begin cultivating the Undying Tendons with the big toe on his left foot. I'll go one toe at a time, he thought. That will be the most stable way to go about it. He was fully convinced that this was the right course. He could already imagine the screams of pain from his enemies when they were completely caught off guard by the power of his toe. Only an idiot would start with the fingers. What good are fingers? Everyone is prepared for someone to attack with the hands. Besides, in a critical moment, how could your fingers help you to escape? But toes are different. Not only can they catch people off guard in a sudden attack, they can also be used to run away at full speed. As long as I have my poor little life, I have everything. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun was convinced that he was the epitome of wisdom, intelligence and courage. He was so pleased that he started looking around for a copper mirror to admire himself in, only to discover that there were no mirrors in his Immortals' cave. That won't do, he thought. I can't believe there's not a single mirror in here. He was feeling more than a little disappointed. However, it was at that point that he thought back to the young woman from the Sky River Court whom he had killed in battle. When he'd scanned her bag of holding, he remembered seeing a mirror. He quickly opened his bag of holding and began rifling through its contents until he found a round, palm-sized copper mirror. He also looked for the little turtle, but didn't find even a trace of him. However, he was used to the turtle's mysterious vanishing acts, and thus wasn't very surprised. After examining the mirror for a bit, Bai Xiaochun was delighted to discover that it wasn't just an ordinary mirror, it was actually a useful magical item. Although it wasn't as extraordinary as his 3 precious treasures, it was still quite impressive. It could form a magical clone. However, it wasn't the type of clone that could be used for fighting, and was more for distracting the enemy. Back when he had been fighting the young woman, he had completely dominated the fight. Plus, his use of the Heavenspan Dharma Eye had made the use of such a clone useless. Not bad at all, actually, he said as he fiddled with the mirror. A moment later, he decided to study the mirror with his third eye. As soon as it opened, he said, violet light flickered within the immortal's cave, then disappeared a moment later when he closed his third eye. It seems that young woman didn't even know the true function of this mirror. Not only can it form magical clones, it can also keep souls alive. Another surprise was that the fluctuations of this mirror were very similar to the fluctuations of the mysterious mask. Although they weren't exactly the same, they were very close. After playing with it for a bit longer, he finally put it off to the side and resumed his cultivation. Time passed. Before long, half a month had gone by. One night when he was in the middle of a session of cultivation, all of the hair on his body suddenly stood on end. Opening his eyes, he noticed that the floor was rippling wildly, and a cold air was building up in the immortal's cave, as if it were being separated from the wider world around him. At the same time, a red beam of light flew out from his bag of holding, and the mask appeared. Then, an ancient voice spoke, seemingly trembling with anxiety. "Don't," Bai Xiaochun gasped. Before the voice could say more than a single word, he produced a stack of paper talismans even larger than before, poured his Heaven Dao Gold Core cultivation base power into them, and then threw them at the mask. Smacking sounds rang out again, along with a roar of rage from within the mask. Then the mask clattered to the floor, and the ripples vanished. Only then did Imposter Nightcrypt's soul float out, trembling. "Finished," he screamed. "We're finished. They came again. What do we do? What are we supposed to do?" Bai Xiaochun was also terrified, and was convinced that if he'd acted any slower, he would have been placed in extreme danger. "Damned evil spirit," Bai Xiaochun said, grinding his teeth. Then he looked over thoughtfully at Imposter Nightcrypt's soul. After a moment, a gleam of determination appeared in his eyes. "Imposter Nightcrypt, I'm going to give you a new home, and you need to cooperate. Otherwise I'll have to throw you into the Heavenspan River along with the mask to feed the fishes." Imposter Nightcrypt began trembling again, and it seemed like he wanted to say something. However, considering how bloodshot Bai Xiaochun's eyes were, he didn't even dare to open his mouth. He simply nodded, eyes shining with terror. "I can mop the floor with that old rabbit," Bai Xiaochun said with a growl, "so I refuse to believe that I can't handle this wimpy little mask." Snorting coldly, he pulled the mirror out and studied it a bit further. Then he performed an incantation gesture with both hands and pointed at the mask. Imposter Nightcrypt immediately began screaming, but then Bai Xiaochun glared at him and he quickly shut his mouth. Bai Xiaochun slipped into complete focus as he unleashed his Heaven Dao aura. His gold core seethed as his cultivation base erupted with power. As a result, his right hand turned completely golden. At the same time, his Heavenspan Dharma Eye opened, shining with intense violet light. A terrifying shockwave blasted out from Bai Xiaochun. The violet light shining from his Heavenspan Dharma Eye was now tinged with gold as a stream of Heaven Dao aura raced through it to land onto the mask. Almost instantly, Bai Xiaochun was able to see the areas where Imposter Nightcrypt's soul was connected to the mask itself. As soon as he saw the connections, he didn't hesitate for even a moment to chop his hand through the air, causing golden light to flicker brightly. "Sever," he growled. Rumbling sounds echoed out as his hand chopped into the connections. The connections trembled. Although they were tough, they were now being assaulted by a Heaven Dao aura, and could only hold firm for a short moment. Then they melted away. Imposter Nightcrypt immediately let out a blood-curdling scream as his soul shot out of the mask. Unexpectedly, as soon as he appeared in the open, some powerful force seemed to grab a hold of him as if to drag him away. Imposter Nightcrypt screamed in terror, and Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped. Thankfully, he already had the mirror ready to go. He quickly waved his sleeve, sending the mirror flying toward Imposter Nightcrypt. In the blink of an eye, Imposter Nightcrypt was sucked inside. After everything was over, Bai Xiaochun was left gasping for breath. Although the events which had just occurred had seemed simple enough, they had actually been incredibly draining. A quick check confirmed that imposter Nightcrypt was now in the mirror. His soul seemed to have been weakened significantly, and he was unconscious but not seriously injured. Bai Xiaochun breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he turned his gaze to the mask. Snorting coldly, he pulled out more paper talismans, which he slapped onto the surface of the mask. In the end, even he wasn't sure how many restrictive spells were sealing the mask, but there were layers upon layers of them. Finally, Bai Xiaochun felt a bit more at ease. Let's see if you manage to misbehave again now that you're in that state. Feeling very pleased with himself, he put the mask away, and then continued with his cultivation. Another half a month went by, during which time the mask didn't act up again. Bai Xiaochun was starting to get a bit distracted, and even found himself pondering the issue of the river-defying pill. Half a month later, he couldn't sit still any longer. I'm already in the gold core stage, he thought, which is already pretty awesome. I need to strike a good balance between hard work and leisure. I can't just sit around cultivating all the time. The more he reasoned on the subject, the more it made sense to leave secluded meditation. With that, he opened his immortals cave and stepped out into the open. After taking in a deep breath of fresh air, he looked around at the river-defying sect, and deep in his heart, a sense of intense pride rose up. Clasping his hands behind his back, he began to stroll through the sect, appreciating the sights as he went. It's been a long time since I saw Big Sis Song, he thought. Man, I miss her. Whenever he thought about Song Junwan's scorchingly sexy appearance, his heart surged with warm feelings. After blinking a few times, he decided that he should go find her and say some loving things. As he walked along, the leaves in the trees rustled, and the birds sang. The spiritual energy in the river-defying sect was abundant, and the entire place seemed like a celestial paradise. He encountered many river-defying sect disciples, including young men and young women, all of whom gazed at him with looks of awe and reverence. Because of his status as junior patriarch, he had one of the highest positions in the entire sect. Such looks of awe were especially noticeable on the faces of the disciples from the Profound and Pillstream divisions, who didn't actually know very much about him. After all, his pure and fair appearance was quite pleasing to the eye. Plus, he enjoyed putting on a good show in public. The truth was that there were quite a few young female disciples who had taken a liking to him. At the moment, he was passing through the Profound Stream division, and ran into some disciples who were offering him greetings. Suddenly, a female disciple flew out from one of the mountains. She was quite a beauty, but was blushing furiously as she hurried over to Bai Xiaochun. To his shock, she bit her bottom lip and averted her gaze as she quickly handed him an envelope. Before he could say anything to her, she turned and hurried away. Cultivators usually used jade slips to communicate with each other, making handwritten letters somewhat of a rarity. Bai Xiaochun gaped in shock for a moment, and then looked down at the envelope to discover that a heart was drawn on its surface. Is this? His eyes went wide, and he gasped. Then he began to shiver in excitement. A love letter. All of the disciples in the area had stopped walking, and were now looking at Bai Xiaochun. The envelope he was holding in his hand was most certainly a love letter. Of course, Bai Xiaochun didn't have much experience getting love letters. As for the surrounding disciples, from the looks in their eyes, they all seemed to be wishing him well over the matter, and some of the male disciples even seemed a bit jealous. Bai Xiaochun's hands were trembling as he held the envelope, and his heart surged with emotions. Then, his eyes widened, filling with excitement. This is the first time in my entire life that I've been given a love letter. The only letters I got in the past were fighting notices. He was so moved that tears began to seep out of the corners of his eyes. Taking a deep breath, he looked up at the young woman who'd given him the letter, who was fleeing as quickly as a frightened bunny. Although I don't even know your name, he murmured, I will definitely cherish this love letter, the first one that has ever been given to me in my entire life. Years from now, I'll show it to my descendants so they can appreciate how charming their patriarch was in his youth. Even as he sighed deeply in his heart, he realized that all of the surrounding river-defying sect disciples were looking at him, and he felt even more wonderful than before. I love the river-defying sect, he thought, and I love all of my fellow disciples. It was with some difficulty that he collected himself and then oh so carefully placed the love letter into his bag of holding. With that, he stuck his chin up, flicked his sleeve, and prepared to make a little speech. But then, another female disciple of the Profound Stream division bit her lip as she made a big decision. Without any more hesitation, she hurried over to Bai Xiaochun, head lowered and cheeks flushed as she pressed an envelope into his hand and then rushed off. Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped at the sight of this second love letter resting there in his hands. Instead of a heart drawn onto the surface of the envelope, it showed two little clasped hands. Bai Xiaochun wasn't the only shocked one. The other disciples who'd begun to gather to see what was happening all began to cry out in shock. There's nothing strange about the junior patriarch getting a love letter. But I can't believe he actually got two of them. Ag. Everybody knows that I, Xu Zhaoshan, am one of the most handsome guys in the sect. How come nobody's ever given me a love letter? Even as the discussions broke out, Bai Xiaochun's hands began to shake, and then he threw his head back and let loose a long cry of joy. His eyes were sparkling, and he was trembling visibly. At the same time, he was deeply and profoundly moved, down to the core of his being. This is only the second love letter I've ever received in my entire life. I never could have imagined that I would actually receive two love letters. Bai Xiaochun couldn't be more excited, and he was virtually panting as he looked at the retreating form of the young woman who'd just given him the letter. After carefully putting the love letter away, his eyes began to gleam with unprecedented determination. I shouldn't be so selfish as to just worry about my own affairs. Ever since I became the junior patriarch, I've become the complete center of attention. All of the disciples are watching me, and that includes the female disciples. Brimming with righteousness, and eyes glittering, he decided that now wasn't the best time to go visit Song Junwan. Instead, he began to stroll through the mountains of the profound stream division. Before he'd gone very far, a third female disciple hurried over to him and shyly handed him an envelope. Then there was a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth. Over the course of the following hours, Bai Xiaochun continued to feel more and more moved. He had received dozens of love letters, all of them handwritten. He was now filled with deep and profound emotions. In response, the disciples who had begun to follow him devolved into pandemonium. Heavens, another one. How could this be happening? He's gotten so many love letters. This. Are those girls all blind or something? He might be the junior patriarch, but I'm a chosen too. Bai Xiaochun was already in a bit of a daze. The first few love letters had left him moved, but now he had dozens of them, and almost couldn't believe it. The sight of so many blushing female disciples caused waves of emotion to batter his heart. Am I really so outstanding? He thought giddily. Eventually, he left the profound stream division's mountains and headed into the pill stream division. Unexpectedly, the first thing that happened was that a female disciple ran over bashfully and handed him a love letter. In fact, one of the particularly creative female disciples had concocted a medicinal pill which she had carved with countless lines of text. It was evening before he returned to Mount River Defiance. Never could he have been prepared for the events of the day, and they left him feeling more blessed than ever. I guess I really am just too outstanding. Ha ha ha. I guess that's what happens when you're dashing like me. Well, like I've always said, only dashing people can get special treatment like this. Bai Xiaochun's giggling laughter filled his immortal's cave as he sat down cross-legged, pulled out all of the love letters he'd received, and spread them out in front of him. It was almost as if a whole group of attractive female disciples were all standing there, bashfully expressing their love to him. After studying the drawings on the envelopes, he began to open and read each letter. Bai Xiaochun was left trembling, and his face was even a bit flushed. That night, his heart burst with emotion over and over again. By the time he finished reading all of the letters, the light of dawn was rising up over the horizon. After the sun was up, Bai Xiaochun rose to his feet, straightened up his garments, and then hurried out of his immortal's cave, a broad smile covering his face. However, even as he stepped into the open, he stopped, then went back inside to change into his official junior patriarch's robe. It was a very ornate Taoist robe, ocean blue and seemingly filled with rippling waves. It had 5 golden dragons embroidered on it, all of them very vivid and lifelike. Every move he made in the robe caused mysterious light to ripple around him, making him look even more heroic and impressive than before. This particular Taoist robe had been prepared for him specifically for the grand ceremony earlier, and he'd only worn it for those 7 days. Back then, he'd believed it to be a bit too uncomfortable. But now, he quickly donned the robe, and then examined himself in the mirror. Pleased with how incredibly handsome he looked, he threw his head back and laughed uproariously, then finally opened the door and stepped outside. As the day went on, he strolled through the 4 divisions of the sect, his chin stuck up as high as ever. Of course, his attire instantly attracted the attention of the river-defying sect disciples. During the night, the news about the love letters had spread, and was now the subject of much discussion. As of now, many people were looking over at Bai Xiaochun with odd expressions on their faces. Of course, most of those odd expressions could be seen on the faces of the male disciples. On the other hand, the female disciples' eyes shone brighter than ever when they saw Bai Xiaochun in his junior patriarch's robe. In one short hour, Bai Xiaochun was delighted to find that more girls were giving him love letters. They came from the profound stream division, the pill stream division, and even from the bloodstream division. Yet again, the onlookers were completely taken aback, and the male disciples began to cry out in distress. What exactly is going on here? Heavens, the junior patriarch must have received over 100 love letters between today and yesterday. Crazy. This is just completely crazy. Bai Xiaochun struggled to keep himself under control. Maintaining a soft and warm expression, he accepted the love letters, and then gave slight smiles to the female disciples who delivered them. When he heard the cries of shock and the exclamations of envy, his heart burst with joy. That was how he spent the following days. During the night, he would spend his time reading the love letters. The matter quickly became the talk of the entire sect. Everyone had different perspectives on what it meant for Bai Xiaochun to have garnered the affections of almost all the female disciples. The gossip in the sect was almost all about Bai Xiaochun. Everyone was talking about him. People like Xu Baosai and Big Fatty Zhang were fairly jealous. As for Hu Xiaomei and Song Junwan, when they heard the news, grim expressions appeared on their faces, and their anger began to burn. 371 letters. Ha ha ha, that's only in the past couple of days. I can't believe I actually got 371 love letters. Even as the sect was in an uproar, Bai Xiaochun was sitting in his immortals cave, looking at his piled-up collection of love letters. Am I really so outstanding? Bai Xiaochun was nearly drunk with pride. Waving his right hand, he produced his little copper mirror and began to examine himself. Sighing emotionally, he realized that he needed someone to share this moment with. Copper mirror, what do you think? Who is the most outstanding person in the entire river-defying sect? Of course, Imposter Night Crypt was inside the copper mirror. As soon as he heard Bai Xiaochun talking, he promptly continued to pretend to be unconscious. He had heard such words uttered by Bai Xiaochun numerous times in the past few days. Considering how terrified he was of Bai Xiaochun, he didn't dare to respond, fearful that if he bungled his response, he would be punished. Bai Xiaochun's eyes widened into a glare. You think I don't know you're awake, copper mirror? He barked. Answer the question. Terrified, Imposter Night Crypt opened his eyes and then fawningly said, Master, you are definitely the most outstanding person in the entire river-defying sect. You're lying, Bai Xiaochun said angrily. Imposter Night Crypt was so frightened by Bai Xiaochun's response that he nearly passed out. That was especially true considering how bloodshot Bai Xiaochun's eyes were. He seemed to be brimming with anger. Imposter Night Crypt immediately gave a piteous cry and then said, I'm not lying. I hereby swear an oath. I swear I'm not lying at all. You're not just one of the most outstanding persons in all the lands of Heavenspan, you're the most outstanding. Really? Bai Xiaochun asked suspiciously. Imposter Night Crypt knew what Bai Xiaochun was trying to do. Therefore, it was with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron that he quickly replied, absolutely. Positively. It's true from many points of view. Bai Xiaochun sighed. Looking very pleased, he put the mirror away, and then began to organize the love letters. Well, since you put it that way, I guess I understand. No wonder so many junior sisters love me. So that's how it is. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.